Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Hero Movie Podcast, your greatest source for superhero movie discussion in the multiverse. I am your host, Adam Portrais, and I'm joined by Sean Koufax.
Hi.
And, of course, Bruce Leslie.
I'm a prickly pear, and naked is the only way to go to Stonehenge.
Isn't it, though? We are going on an adventure ourselves all the way back to, what's the year on this thing?
2014, maybe?
Yeah. We're going to be talking Thor the Dark World. We've covered the other Thor movies, but we've taken we've kind of been skirting this one for a while, and we're going to find out if that was actually the smart thing to do, or if, maybe we've changed our minds since this last Thor movie and everything. Who knows? But before we get started and everything, do want to thank everybody that supports this show over at patreon.com/HMP. There you will find pre-show, post-show, and of course the Dinger Zone. This week's Dinger Zone, everybody, is it's giant. It's about 45 minutes long, and is us talking all things Marvel and a couple other little things from the San Diego Comic-Con this year. So, and we're probably going to be doing more of that on the next Dinger Zone as well. So check us out over at patreon.com/HMP. And I'm going to do something a little bit different because I want the month of August to be Listener Appreciation Month. So even if you're down at the $1 level, we're going to get you the Dinger Zone, because I want people to see what they're kind of missing here. And especially with, episodes like we just put out today, I think they might go, maybe this is worth checking out. So head on over to patreon.com/HMP today and join up. So Thor the Dark World. Why haven't we done this yet, guys?
I don't think we've avoided it intentionally. We've just had a pretty organic schedule where things come up, and then when we are stopping to think of something, we just don't think about it. I think a lot of people don't. This is one of those MCU movies that you just don't think about that often. But then Endgame kind of refreshed our memories a little bit, and we said, hey, let's cover this.
Yeah, it seems to be one of those movies where, because, we started around, like, at the beginning of phase 2, we started this podcast, or you guys started this podcast. And so it's one of those things where you think that you've covered all of the MCU, but guess what? It didn't happen.
There's always a little bit missing here and there, and some of there are even bigger movies than this, certainly, that we have yet to cover. So
yeah, like Iron Man 2.
That's true. Iron Man 2 is definitely one of those. But so we're going to be talking Thor the Dark World 2013, as according to the interwebs. So that's good there. Let's do this before we get into it, though, because we have to figure out, some of the most important things here. So let's do this. Oh, come on, guy. This comic book connection. All right. I hate this machine so much. My Lord.
Actually, I like that version of the song somehow.
It's what we call truncated.
Start with high energy, end with a quick statement.
Done.
Malekith the Accursed is a Thor villain created by Walt Simonson, who first appeared in 1984. And just to be clear, it was Malekith that first appeared in 1984, not Walt Simonson. He was around before then. But Malekith grew up in Svartalfheim, and boy, do I love these names from Thor. But Svartalfheim is the land of the Dark Elves, and Malekith grew up during a time in which they were at war with the trolls. And his family life wasn't great, as 12 of his older brothers died in the war, and then his mother sold him for 2 sacks of snake livers and a half a barrel of pickled toads. Honestly, it sounds like a pretty good deal if you ask me. I mean, do you know how many snake livers you can fit in 2 sacks? I'd say more than you need for sure. But in Norse mythology, dark elves are called Svartalfar, which literally translated means dusky or swarthy elves. And I just want to go on record as saying I think it's good Marvel didn't go with swarthy elves for the name of the Svartalfheimians. Now, as far as the way Malekith looks, he seems to be more inspired by drow that were introduced into the D&D universe in 1977 than he does to any of the Norse mythological depictions I found. Strangely enough, in Scots dialect, drow means troll rather than elf, but was used to refer to any number of evil sprites. Now, after being sold by his mother, Malekith found gainful employment burning bodies. And this worked out well until he was captured by trolls, and not the cute Justin Timberlake kind of trolls, but the evil, scary kind of trolls. And while he was in troll prison, he met a wizard. And the wizard helped Malekith escape, and Malekith repaid the favor by killing the wizard. But not before the wizard zapped Malekith and scarred half his face. Guys, it's killing me because Malekith is misspelled every time to something that autocorrect thinks is more appropriate than Malekith. So I'm stumbling a little bit. But Malekith went on to kill his snake liver loving mother, and he also stole her dogs, which happened to be the hounds of the Wild Hunt. His next adventure took him to Earth, where he used fairy food to influence humans and capture the cask of ancient winners, which the astute listener will realize is something I'm pretty sure we discussed in the animated Avengers Christmas movie a couple of years ago. Now, Malekith also convinced one of his dark elven brethren, Algrim the Strong, to fight Thor, which results in Algrim falling into a pit of molten lava. Algrim is later healed by the cosmic entity the Beyonder, who transforms him into a much more powerful being called Curse, who is apparently twice as strong as Thor. Algrim and Curse appear in Thor the Dark World, but you have to read the subtitles to catch their names, so I'm letting Adam know that they're there.
Thank you.
Now, later on, Malekith set his sights on the Mandarin's 10 rings, which caused him to cross paths with Iron Man, which was unfortunate for Malekith, as Dark Elves have a particular weakness toward iron. Now, Malekith found himself once again in prison in Niflheim this time, but he managed to escape, and he went back home where he was elected king because Dark Elves respect those they fear, and they all definitely feared Malekith. Now, Malekith managed to strike a deal with Roxxon CEO, who just happened to be the Minotaur, because it's Roxxon after all. And the deal gave Roxxon mining rights to all 9 realms once Malekith conquered them. Most recently, Malekith was a big bad of Marvel's latest event, War of the Realms, an event in which Malekith has successfully conquered 8 realms, and he attempted to complete his set by conquering Midgard. Thanks to multiple incarnations of Thor and all of his superpowered friends, Malekith gets stopped, and Odin dons some sweet golden Iron Man armor. Now, War of the Realms may have had some tiny similarities with Thor the Dark World, but with a story I could actually follow that was written by Jason Aaron. We know that there is a 2-pronged future for Thor in the MCU, but what I want to know is if they'll ever bring Malekith back and maybe make him cool the next time.
All signs. Let me get my little 8-ball here. All signs point to no.
Oh, hold on. Let me pull out my jump to conclusions, Matt.
No,
I broke my ankle.
Yeah, that's how it tends to work a little bit. So yeah, man, this one is directed by Alan. What was it again? Alan Taylor. Very generic kind of name. And he took over the spot from Patty Jenkins, who would then later go on to do Wonder Woman. And listen, now if we're comparing 2 films here, I think I got to go Wonder Woman. That's just the first blush.
Yeah. The box office definitely goes Wonder Woman.
I will say this, though. This movie made a lot more money than you might possibly expect. On a budget of $170 million, it made $644 worldwide. So it made more money than Thor did.
There's also the other thing with this movie, which is that, when it first came out, not everybody loved it. I mean, listen to us talking about how often we think about this movie. And, I have only seen it the one time in the movie theater until this week. And it's one of those movies where when you dig a little deeper into it, like, Chris Hemsworth was not super happy with being in Thor, the Dark World. And that's when you started hearing those stories of like, oh, hey, he might want to not be Thor anymore. Like you kept hearing stuff like that. And then you have that. You have Alan Taylor, the director, who said, I will never work for Marvel again after this movie was over. And then you have Natalie Portman, who very, very clearly does not want to be in this movie as you're watching this movie. And so all of those things combined make this a movie that people look back on and go, you know what, I'm like, this is not my favorite Marvel movie. But the thing that this thing has going for it is that, one, people haven't been poring over Thor the Dark World. It's not something where people are doing a ton of deep dives on it. So when they bring it up in Endgame, it was like, oh, right, Thor 2, that's a thing. I totally forgot about that. And then on top of that, the fact that Thor Ragnarok was such a great movie that if Thor 2 can be forgiven for not being the greatest movie ever made. But Thor, having the luxury of having the third movie be great, you give it kind of a pass. It's the sort of thing where, Iron Man 2 and Iron Man 3 isn't nearly as great as Thor Ragnarok is. And so Iron Man 2 really gets hammered at, especially since Marvel's trying to figure out what they're doing at that time. And it's the same thing with Thor Ragnarok, where they really haven't like nailed it down yet of like, oh, this is how you keep multiple storylines juggling. And you know, you go from movie to movie with all these different storylines. And so it's kind of ham-fisted and kind of, you know, like hardwired, and it's not quite there yet, but it's getting there.
Here's what I think is the thing that hit viewers hardest in a negative fashion, especially if you take from it, you know, our present day point of view on Thor. And we know how much fun, at least for me, and I think I'm speaking for a lot of others too. I really enjoy Chris Hemsworth as a little bit of a dopey, self-confident, and it gets really funny when it's misplaced confidence in Endgame. But we like the Thor as a more comedic character. Even when he's like in his sad, dark, brooding phase, he can still say something really kind of dumb, you know, like they're playing, okay, he's gotten by on his looks and muscles, and he's never had to develop his intelligence very much. I think that some of those elements were first introduced when Joss Whedon directed Avengers. I think we got our first clues at like how Thor could be a little bit more fun, because Joss Whedon has a very definite style to what he does. And, you know, regardless of what you think about Joss Whedon present day, everyone loved Avengers. Yeah. And the problem is that this Thor the Dark World comes out after Avengers, right?
Yep.
So we've got a little glimpse at how Thor should be handled, and then we go back to seeing him directed by a guy who is a great director of episodes of Game of Thrones, and he tries to direct this like that. Instead of directing this like what we expect the Thor movie to be after seeing things like Ragnarok and Infinity War and him interacting with the Guardians of the Galaxy at the end of Endgame. So I think it's really just because I think if this came out before Avengers, it would have been received a little bit better. I really do.
You're probably not wrong there. Well, let's get into the movie proper here and everything. Here is the fake trailer for Thor the Dark World.
What happens when a hard-working modern woman searches for the boyfriend that ghosted her 2 years ago? Well, she gets infected by an ancient entity and things get a little crazy. Thor the Dark World, a perfect date movie for the most romantic month of the year. No Shave November. Buy plenty of popcorn.
Bruce, I'm going to be honest, I have no idea what that means. Why?
I love that so much, Bruce. I love that so much.
Buy plenty.
That is exactly what fake trailers are supposed to be. That is so great. Good job by you.
This, of course,
it's a feel-good popcorn movie. It's a rom-com.
Okay,
you know?
It sounded dirty.
You didn't think that these two wacky people were going to be able to work out their differences, but in the end, they're in love.
What do you know?
Good.
Yep, Chris Hemsworth, Natalie Portman, Tom Hiddleston, Stellan Skarsgård, Anthony Hopkins. You know, just everybody that's in the Elba, all the cool cats, man.
Right.
So yeah, you're right though. I mean, coming off of Avengers, it feels like they should have done something a little bit different, but at the same time, I think I feel like where their head was at was like, hey, we had Branagh come in and do this Thor. It was very kind of Shakespearean. That's precisely why we got Kenneth Branagh to do it. And they kind of I think they felt like they needed to still kind of have a little bit of that in there. And ultimately, as we've seen with in Thor Ragnarok, that is not the case. So yeah, I think that's what they were still kind of grasping onto, and I think, like we've said a couple of times now, everybody in this is just kind of, they're doing okay. They're not, you know, giving a horrible performance, but
with one exception.
And then of course is Hiddleston, who's killing it.
Yeah. Do we want to talk about that exception now and get that out of our system?
We might as well.
Okay. I'll let you guys lead the conversation.
All right, so here's the thing, right, is that you don't care about Thor the Dark World. You know, the plot of that movie is not something where, because the villain of this movie, no one cares. I mean, with the exception of maybe Bruce, like literally nobody cares about the plot of this movie. And you know, you find yourself like fading away, at least I did watching it. So if I do it, then everyone must do it. Fading away as you're watching a movie. And then we see the Hannibal Lecter version of Loki, and everything changes on a dime. It's the best movie you've ever seen. Everything about anything with Loki in it, you know, the kind of chemistry that Loki and Thor have in this movie are really what they need for Jane and Thor to have, and they don't have it. Because those two actors and those two characters work so well together that I could almost see a movie where it's like Midnight Run, but with Thor and Loki. You know, I know that they said that that's what Thor Ragnarok was going to be with the Hulk, but they really honestly could do that with Thor and Loki, and everyone would see it always, everywhere, because it's such a good idea, because those two characters are so great together. But whenever you are seeing Malekith, where if it's a Jane thing, and I know that Kat Denning, is that her name?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
When Kat Denning, I know she is supposed to be the comic relief. She is not funny in this movie. Maybe she is hilarious on Two Girls and a Pizza Party or whatever show that is that she's on. But she is terrible. She is terrible in this movie. She's cloying and annoying, and she does have that one line where she misnames the hammer again, and that's funny. But basically everything else, every time she shows up, it's a bummer. You know what I mean? And it's this script is clearly written by 75 different people, because there are drop plot lines. There's like themes that they start and then don't finish. But you can always go back to the Loki stuff, and that's what makes this movie good. Is that, yes, it's not the best one, but watch it specifically so that you can watch Thor and Loki play off each other, because they are so terrific together.
I think Kat Denning didn't have much written for here. I liked her a lot in the first Thor movie. Yes. I've never really watched Two Broke Girls, a guy in a pizza place, starring Kat Denning and Ryan, what's his last name, Reynolds?
Something like that.
But I really all I know about her is the Thor movies, and I remember myself thinking, oh, I really like her, and when I saw this movie, you hardly know that she's there, which is too bad.
There's a couple just like, hey, all right, well, that's a joke you made. Another one. There's another one. I mean, they're fine. They're like 2s, 3s.
Most of the movie takes place on realms other than Midgard, so it's hard for her to have much of a role unless they zapped her and the intern Ian along too, which, boy, that would have been weird. But, Natalie Portman, Natalie Portman, like we talked about, she doesn't want to be in this movie.
No. Clearly not.
And I also remember around this time watching this movie, this was when I started to kind of not be as big a Natalie Portman fan too, probably because, the effort that she's putting forth here. And I really started liking her around Attack of the Clones. And this is when I really decided to stop liking her so much, which I didn't quite understand what was happening at the time. But yeah, I was just losing interest in what she was doing. But I don't know what the rub was necessarily. Did she just think it was a poor quality movie, a poor quality role? I always thought like the way you handle that is to just knock people's socks off with what you got anyway. I don't know. What's the deal there?
I can't speak specifically to it, but I've got a guess. Is that you're talking about an actress who is smarter than your average actor. Sure. I mean, she actually is. Where if you have a pretty dumb script, if you have a director that also is not having a good time, she is going to then also be a problem on set. And she's professional enough to know, like, oh, you know what, I'm just gonna hit my mark, say my lines, and go home. And that's really what this feels like. This performance feels that way, because we're talking about the same person who is, I mean, it's not just the genre of movie, because she's very, very good in V for Vendetta. She's good in other nerdy properties. She just doesn't want to be in this. I mean, clearly doesn't want to be in it. And it's one of those things where she, like, it's why we were so surprised hearing at San Diego Comic-Con this week, and you should really listen to the Dinger Zone because we really get into it, that she has agreed to be in the new Thor movie. Because of all the people, it would be like hearing that the dude who originally played Red Skull is coming back. Nobody talked.
Hugo Weaving is back as Red Skull. Actually, no, he's not.
I mean, it really does feel that way.
Yeah, no, it does, because it was. Honestly, that was one of the biggest shockers of that whole thing. Is just like, not only is it going to be this, but she's coming back. It's like, what? Huh?
And
okay.
Terrence Howard is Blade.
Oh my gosh, that would be the worst.
That would be great. Also, I just started wondering if maybe she was losing some enthusiasm for the profession. I mean, she's been at it by 2013. She's been at it for 19, almost 20 years. Yeah. You know, I mean, she started young. She one thing that Keanu Reeves has famously said is that he's already made enough money to live for several centuries. So money's not going to play into it when he decides what to do on a daily basis. Because I'm looking at what she's made after Thor: The Dark World, and I wouldn't call any of these things necessarily high profile.
I think that they were going for high profile with the thing a year ago, 2 years ago, where her husband gets lost in the
Annihilation. That's great.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I didn't see that one. So you're right. But that's also 5 years after Thor: The Dark World.
Yeah.
And I'm just looking there. 2013, she didn't make anything in 2014. 2015, she made a Terrence Malick movie. So that's a thing in and of itself.
You either like that or you don't.
Yeah. A couple of other things I'm not familiar with. Then in 2016, she has a little fun with Pride and Prejudice and Zombies. But you know, until coming around to doing this Thor: Love and Thunder, this is the first time I think she's really done anything super high profile. Well, like you said, Annihilation too. So but that's still 3 years ago. So I just wonder if maybe she'd kind of reached a point where she was ready to kind of chill out a little bit.
I mean, she got a nomination for Jackie and stuff. She's done a ton of work. I mean, I think you're shortchanging Miss Portman on her portfolio of films here, Bruce.
Maybe. I mean, she did take a 2-year break.
They're just not finding the Bruce portfolio is all
exactly.
That's true.
And there's undeniably a 2-year break. You know, 2 years might be a long time for a lady who's worked as much as Natalie Portman has.
Well, she's having babies and stuff now too.
Hey, when I had babies, I didn't get to take 2 years off work.
I think your wife did most of that work.
Hey, buddy, I was there.
I participated.
Yeah, when are you going to get back in shape?
Never.
Pregnancy panel.
So the other, you know, she is rough. She is rough in this movie, and it's one of those things where it's more of the same, right? It's the thing that we're high-fiving Marvel for now with their new slate up to 2021, is that there is nothing in there where you're like, well, that's more of the same stuff. Yeah. Whereas Thor: The Dark World is one of those movies where, I mean, it's just a continuation of the first Thor movie. And Marvel has gotten really, really good at not giving you the same exact thing over and over again. And it's great that they've done that. And you know, and if I can go backwards for a second and talk about just the writing of this movie itself, this clearly was something that was Frankenstein together by a bunch of different scripts or script doctors or what have you, because you've got a bunch of things happening, and the script is just all over the place. Like there's the love triangle that kind of just goes away with the Jane Foster and Sif with Thor thing that just completely goes out the window. You never see that happen again. So that's one plot line that just completely goes away. Then you also have the thing where the guy who played Ada BC, I don't know the actor's
The guy who
name.
played what?
The guy who played Ada BC in the HBO series about prison. Oz. Okay. He's on Oz. That guy, he plays Malekith's second in command. You know, big dude.
Okay, he plays Algrim the Strong,
right?
Who becomes Curse, who's a more significant character in the comics than this movie does.
Well, he's a more significant character, in my opinion, than Malekith is in this movie, because he does a lot more stuff than Malekith does.
Yeah, I remember at the time I saw it, my biggest complaint was that they kind of wasted Malekith. Like, you know, he's not necessarily an A-list villain in the grand scheme of comic books, but when it comes to Thor, Loki is your biggest villain, and then you've got Malekith right there as like number 2. And I felt like they really didn't have Malekith do anything here. And I thought that's really interesting casting. You know, the nerdosphere gets pretty excited when a former doctor gets cast, you know, as anything. So they had pretty good luck. They did better their second time around with David Tennant as Kilgrave, but they've got Eccleston, a guy who wasn't real happy about really being the doctor, from what I understand. Adam, right. Have you heard anything along those lines?
I mean, he's another one of those cats that just goes like, yes, this sounds like a great idea. And then when he's there, just goes, why did I sign up for this?
But there was some excitement about him. I felt like they didn't ask the actor to do anything. They didn't write much for the character to do. I remember thinking like Malekith was almost not Malekith in this movie the first time around. So I'm glad I rewatched it, because it's one of those things where, you know, your mind remembers something being exceptionally good or bad, and with time it gets gradually either better or worse depending on which way you leaned at it. So he wasn't as insignificant as I remembered. I remember being miserable because at least the visuals of Malekith is kind of cool in the comics, and I thought they even like messed up his old visuals, but they did scar half his face and kind of give him that one side is black, one side is white kind of look to his face. So they did give some nods to the comics, but I didn't even remember that part. But I just remember thinking, wow, like why even bother giving these villains names that are significant if you're not going to treat them like, you know, they could have just been mindless trolls, you know, didn't even have to be the Dark Elves in this movie. And now seeing everything unfold with Endgame and seeing how this whole cinematic universe worked out and understanding that there was a master plan that had to start coming into place around the time of the first Avengers, I feel like they were told, okay, in this movie, we need to do a couple things. We need to introduce another Infinity Stone, and we need to come up with some reason that Thor isn't just hanging around Asgard all the time, because that was kind of a big problem even in Avengers, was like, how do we get Thor out of Asgard, you know? Because Thor's idea at the end of the first movie is I got sent to Earth as a punishment. I proved myself. Now I can go back to Asgard and just live out the rest of my days there. And they did those things. They introduced the ether, and they come up with some kind of reason for Thor to leave Asgard at the end. And I think they were told, you do those two things, we don't care what else you do. You have the rights to any of the Thor-specific villains, but we don't want you using villains that might show up in other characters' standalone movies just yet. So they grabbed, okay, we've already got Loki. What are some other names that might be interesting? And they went with the Dark Elves.
Something that I noticed this go around with the Dark World is that I think one of the reasons why the Malekith character doesn't really work too well is because the majority of his, and this is just a guess, I'm throwing this out here, but see what you guys think. I think part of how we don't really connect to that character fully is because he's speaking Elvish, I guess we'll call it, or not English.
He's speaking Elvish the whole time with subtitles. So that's why I made the little joke about Algrim is in this movie and Curse is in this movie, but if you're not A, reading the subtitles, and then B, interpreting their way of saying that you're going to go from Algrim to Curse, you don't even get that that's what's going on until you see him show up and he looks like Curse.
It's a little bit much, and I think had we just had him just speaking English throughout the entire thing, that we'd feel something a bit more for this character, because I think that language barrier, especially you add the language barrier plus all the makeup that he's wearing and everything, it's very hard for us to connect to this character because it's so foreign.
Yeah, Adam, I've got to say this first. I've got to have this addendum first. You're one of my oldest friends at this point. I love you like crazy. That is the dumbest thing you've ever said. Is that just because someone is speaking a different language doesn't mean an audience can't connect with them.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying this one doesn't.
The reason why you can't connect with this character has nothing to do with the fact that he isn't speaking English. It is because everything that they do is completely inconsequential. Whether you have like when you see Thor's hand get cut off that first time, you're like, oh, holy crap, I can't believe we just saw Thor's hand get cut off. Oh, it's going to be just like Old Man Thor. This is going to be so great. And then it completely goes away. And the second that happens, you do not care what happens in the plot for the rest of the movie. Because you're immediately taken out because nothing matters now.
And interestingly enough, in the comics, it is Malekith that's responsible for Thor getting his arm cut off.
That's cool.
Yeah. So I know that's maybe the Easter egg they were trying to drop there. But I'm going to take a line somewhere down the middle. First off, yes, he doesn't do anything that's consequential, and the story does undermine it. But even in a movie that's mediocre, if you have a great performance, you can still get pulled into it. Case in point, in this very movie, as you've already brought up, is Tom Hiddleston. I don't know if Chris Eccleston is an incredible actor or not. You know, I've seen him in two things, this and that one season of Doctor Who that he did. But let's say that he was, because there's no real reason that he needs to be speaking Klingon here. So let's just say he was delivering his lines in English and leaving his natural accent in there and everything, just to, you know, because this thing's full of British and Australian and anything other than an American accent for the most part. Maybe we do find him a little more sinister. Maybe we relate to him a little bit more. That's
just my point. I'm not saying that you're not wrong, Sean, because that's the major portion of it. Absolutely. I absolutely agree with that, is that this character is not constructed well. But if they wanted to give it a little bit of, you know, relatability, that's just another hurdle that they had to put in front of this character that they didn't already develop well enough to begin with. I'm just saying they weren't doing themselves any favors is all.
Just think how much better Jabba the Hutt would have been if he spoke English with a Brooklyn accent.
And that's exactly what my point is. That's exactly my point. Oh my God, I'm having such a hard time not cursing tonight.
I get it. I agree.
So here's the other thing about this movie too. And this is why everyone's completely shut off from this movie. Yeah. Is that not only does nothing matter because there's no stakes in this movie, because yet again, it's one of those things where not only is this dude trying to destroy Earth and every other realm, he's trying to take existence away completely and totally. And they don't call in anyone else. He just fought with the Avengers. He should bring in other people to help him with this. And it's the thing that I think about. I was thinking about the first time I saw it. I didn't think about that now with the second viewing. But the first time I was like, where is everybody else? There's so many. You have so many friends now who would be helping you with this. And they're not here. And the reason why
you don't even bother to throw away a line that says, "Oh, they're not. We can't get them." You don't even bother to do that. You just pretend they don't exist.
Right. Exactly.
Even worse than that, they're talking about Kat Denning and Jane Foster back in London are worried S.H.I.E.L.D. is going to show up and take over the scene. You know, and even right. With like, oh man, S.H.I.E.L.D.'s going to show up any minute. S.H.I.E.L.D.'s going to show up and ruin our day. And S.H.I.E.L.D. never shows up in any capacity whatsoever.
Right. And so the second thing that makes this movie not work is that they need to have the second Infinity Gem, right? And so this is the reality gem is what we're dealing with in this movie. But when I first saw this, I didn't know that that's what they were talking about. I didn't realize it until the very end when you see the Collector. That, oh, hey, okay, so this is going to be in an Infinity War kind of thing. Well, But when you're watching the movie, all it is red magic blood stuff is everywhere all the time.
Now they do have this thing where Odin is explaining a little bit of it. He's mansplaining it to Thor or something, and he does talk about how there are these ancient artifacts. There are 6 of them. Most of them are stones. One of them is the ether. So they do give us that. So if you're really paying attention, which is hard to do in this movie sometimes. Man. Now, having watched this movie, having seen the Infinity Gauntlet, having seen the end of Endgame multiple times, at least 3 times at this point, I still am not sure that I know which one is the ether. It is the reality for sure.
It is the reality for sure because the theme of this movie is chaos.
Yeah, but
you're trying to halt the progress of chaos is the entire theme of this movie.
So having you spelled it out to me that this is the reality stone, which I always thought maybe it's the cosmic cube. Anyway, I've always had trouble with how they've dealt with the stones in the movies, other than a couple, the Mind Stone and the Soul Stone are pretty clear. But the reality stone, nothing that the ether does in this movie seems to reflect what I would expect the reality gem to do. You know what I mean? It just seems more like a power gem or an anti-power gem or something. It destroys everybody who touches it, except for Jane Foster, who can absorb it without being destroyed, but rather dying slowly. And it hurts that in Endgame, I realized that all you need is a raccoon that looks like a rabbit with a thing that looks like a gun that's got a needle on to poke you in the back of the leg, and you can extract it. You know, because they're running around trying to extract it in this little thing that looks like a I don't know, like an aluminum canister with a handle on it. And here it's like the greatest minds of Asgard don't know how to extract this. It's sort of weird watching it in retrospect how, man, this would all be simpler if they just had one of those aluminum canisters with a needle on it.
They had a couple more years to think about it.
But it is one of those that isn't done favors in retrospect in that regard. But still, I've complained not just this movie, but in all the movies that a lot of the stones, it's not easy for me to line up exactly which one they're supposed to be just by the contents of the story. I have to look it up on a chart and see which one is which.
I wonder if nowadays, if they had never done any of that and just started it now, if they would actually have the guts to say, do it gem-wise and just go by the traditional names and stuff. I think they might.
Yeah, and I don't know why they thought calling it stones seemed more realistic than calling it gems. I never understood that change either, changing it from gems to stones. But this isn't either one of those. This is more of a glob.
You buy gems at Claire's. You don't do, come on.
You buy stones at the quarry.
Yeah,
That's
get it
what Mr.
right.
Granite taught me. I want to talk about the Warriors 3.
Yes.
The significance of the Warriors 3 is that they're close friends, very close friends with Thor. And, when they show up in the first movie, it works because we don't have any other Asgardians around. So they're like his friends, obviously. But in this movie, I almost felt like they felt just about on par with random Asgardians. And I think poor Hogan's not even in Asgard. He's off at Fartelheim or something. I don't know. I hate these names. Nippelheim.
We're going
Fartelheim.
over to Fart and Nippelheim.
Yeah. But I kind of felt like, man, and they're bringing back like legitimate actors to play these roles that are very easy to overlook. Even Sif, as you already pointed out. I feel like Sif, who was kind of the bright, shining, supporting character from the Asgardian side in the first one, Sif's pretty easy to forget in this one, too.
It feels like they start with her character. It's just like, oh, she's going to be a much bigger part in this film, and then she's not.
And here's the feeling I get with Sif in this movie, is I kind of feel like Odin really wishes he could break a little bit of that off, but since he can't, he's really trying to live vicariously through his son. Like it's weird just how much he's trying to point his son in that direction.
Yeah, it's true.
And
and they, seeing Zachary Levi in this and seeing just how little he has to do and seeing how much he shines, I'm wondering how much of him shining has to do with we know where he's headed, that he's, at least for me.
Now here's something
Sure.
I want to say about Fandral, the character that Zachary Levi plays. He does have one nice scene where he gets to be the guy in the skiff that catches him and takes him out.
That's
and I
fun.
love the character of Fandral. I know he's based on Errol Flynn's interpretation of Robin Hood, but growing up, I always saw him as more of a Dread Pirate Scott kind of guy. But the thing with me here is, even though I know it's Zachary Levi, and now the first time through, I don't know that the name Zachary Levi would have meant much to me. I just knew he was recast. But even knowing that it's Zachary Levi and having Zachary Levi's face in my mind pretty clear from both Shazam and the Fabulous Mrs. Maisel, I still don't see Zachary Levi when I look at Fandral. And I think that's both cool and bothersome. Like I really want to see it. And I don't know, does he have prosthetics on and stuff, or is it just
hair? It's all the hair. The hair,
just the hair.
The hair and the facial hair throw you off. Yeah,
it throws me way off. Knowing, I mean, like I paused the movie at one point just to kind of like look over the face, and I got a 4K TV now, and still I'm like, wow. I mean, I know it's Zachary Levi. I'm not disputing it, but I just can't get my mind to see Zachary Levi there as Fandral.
I see Paul Rubens. What is this?
Oh, I forgot. I've got my Pee-wee filter turned on. Every character's Paul Rubens.
You got to turn that one off. It's on by default in your TV. It'll, you don't want it on there.
Well, it was a Christmas gift. My wife knows me.
It's got the exclusive
and Ray
Pee-wee package.
Stevens, another guy I really like, and I feel like, man, I wish that Volstagg had a little more to do here.
Yeah,
That
like
guy-
you want to talk about a character that doesn't exist practically in this film.
No kidding. And that guy has so much range, man. Ray Stevens. Think of all the acting he's done. He wrote and performed The Streak.
And, looking at the casting of the characters and seeing sort of how they really splashed into the movie with the original Thor, There was a part of me that thought we were probably going to get a Sif and the Warriors 3 spin-off movie or something, and that, of course, never materialized. I know Sif went on to Blind Spot, which, from what I understand, was a pretty successful show, right?
I'm not sure what that is.
Oh, maybe not so successful. I heard that's why she kind of exited the MCU.
Wrote and performed The Streak.
Yes. Wow, you were like me begging for a laugh on that one, Sean.
Listen,
No, I wasn't. I just thought it was.
I will tell you,
like, because there was a pause. I was like, "That's the perfect time."
go back in the tape. You can hear me laugh because I know it's coming down Front Street.
It's Me Again, Margaret was the superior song.
I like the day the squirrel went berserk, but that's just me.
So there are a lot of people in this movie where there's a lot of actors working in this movie where you're just like, oh wow, they really aren't giving her much to do, huh? Like the woman who plays the Borg Queen in Star Trek First Contact, she's in this movie, and I can't remember. Oh, there it is. It's Alice Krieg is her name, and she plays an Asgardian, and they give her almost nothing to do.
Yeah.
You have Anthony Hopkins in this movie, and the thing that I know about Anthony Hopkins is that when he has lines, like if he has lines on a page, like let's say he's reading a script, he puts in some scenes he puts RNA, which means requires no acting. All you have to do is just say the lines and be Anthony Hopkins. I'm thinking that 90% of his work in this particular Thor requires no acting. I think he all he has to do is be Anthony Hopkins and say a couple of lines and wear and wear an eye patch.
I was about to say his depth perception in this was really difficult. So listen, who's to say he's not acting?
Even as much as we love Heimdall in these Thor movies, he does not have a whole lot to do in this movie.
Yeah.
Yeah. He has his one spot where he detects the invisible ship coming into Asgard, and he like runs along the cables on the suspension bridge and jumps through the air and digs his sword into it. He has like a really cool shining spot in all three of the movies where he gets his moment to do something. But overall, you're right. He doesn't get to do a whole lot.
Not really.
Not Idris Elba levels of cool.
Yeah, that's why it felt like, when we finally get to where we get with his character later, that it was just like really freeing him of the burden to have to play this character.
He looks like he has a much bigger role in that Calvin and Hobbes movie they're making.
Yes, perhaps.
But I want to talk about the guy that plays Eric Selvig. First off, I think it would really be a lot of fun because they filmed on location in London for some of this, right?
Yeah.
I think it would really be fun to take that trip out to Salisbury or wherever and run around naked at Stonehenge. And I know they make you put a sock on it, but still, I just think that would be a lot of fun to run around Stonehenge like he was doing. That scene looked fun to me.
It's only Bruce that would just be like, what would be fun? Disrobing and being chased by people to be arrested.
Around
Stonehenge. The streak.
And also, what's the family tree with all the stars guards? Are they stars guards, scars guards, guard scars?
Well, you've said it 58 times now. I don't know what's true anymore.
It's Skarsgård.
There you go.
So what is the family tree? Like he's related to Pennywise the Clown, right?
That's his son.
Okay.
Yes.
He's also related to the guy from True Blood, right?
Also his son.
Is he related to the guy from Vikings that plays Floki?
I don't know who that is.
Gustav Skarsgård. Yeah, it's Gustav Skarsgård.
Yes, he is the father of Gustav Skarsgård.
Is the circle above the A? If the answer is yes, then that's one of his kids.
Man, what a talented family.
Yeah.
That's a good group right there. Because they're all actually really great in very different ways.
Yeah.
I love both of my parents. I wouldn't trade them for anything except for maybe Stellan Skarsgård. Because even if I didn't make it big, I'd still have plenty of relatives that made it big, and they'd probably get me nice gifts.
The funniest part is Bruce's dad actually listens to this show, so
yeah, I wouldn't trade him for anybody. But if I did, it'd be Stellan Skarsgård, because I've always wanted to live in Sweden.
Well, there you go. But if you did, see, that's better. That wraps it up in a better bow to where it doesn't sound like you're just like, listen, I'll trade my dad for any B-level celebrity.
I could just imagine all of them riding their bicycles together in Stockholm, and everybody just waves and claps for them.
Pretty much. But yeah, no, listen, he's good. We do need to quickly touch on I think this is one of the more underrated Stan Lee cameos. Because it's a great little 2-second joke.
Can I get my shoe back?
It is a pretty good joke.
It's so much fun. It's just like he's in there. It's half a second, but it's real good. It's funny. Awesome cameo.
It's also one of those where you could see it coming from a mile away, where you see Skarsgård in front of the blackboard, and it's like, well, he's either talking to no one in a room, or he's like in the loony bin.
Yeah, everyone's either going to go like, oh, this guy's nuts, or
right.
Now, when we make it to the end here, let's go ahead. I don't know. Do you have any other real compelling things to say other than more talk about the Skarsgård family?
Just that what a dynamo of a family. They've really moved up the ranks of like acting families, when you really think about it. I mean, the Baldwins have really fallen off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's got to be the Skarsgårds at this point, right?
Oh, yeah. That at least until Manuel Lewis has some kids.
This is all right. Well, there we have it.
Man, I'd love a whole bunch of like Mr. T kids. They had to roll Bobby T, Billy T, Mommy T.
If they had
Susan
a Mr. T show that was basically like an action version of the Partridge Family, I'd watch that.
They did. It was a cartoon. It was called Mr. T. And he traveled around the country in a van with a bunch of gymnasts.
Kids. Yeah. Oh yeah,
I
remember.
A dog who had a mohawk, and it was the greatest show ever made.
I remember.
Oh,
I vaguely remember
sometime
that,
off air,
yeah.
I'm gonna have to tell you a story about a dog with the mohawk that I saw recently.
Mr. T and the T-Force, it was called. I want to do actually, I know there's a comic book of Mr. T and the T-Force. We could technically do that on this show.
To the archives. Hey, look, we found an animated series that Sean wants to watch.
Hey, I like that Mr. T rap video about be good to your mom. She knows more than you. That was a good video.
Hey, sometimes
I don't
you have
know
to
any
have
of that. All I know is him with the gymnast.
You got to get a good message across.
So Mr. T is part of the Skarsgård family, it appears. I just looked it up.
Very nice.
Yeah.
He didn't know how to spell Skarsgård, so he just went with T.
Terrence Skarsgård.
Now, the mid-credits scene here with the collector. First off, I'm a big Benicio del Toro fan, across the board, even though sometimes I pronounce his name wrong. Sure. I had remembered this scene so differently than what it really was. I remembered a little more weirdness coming off the collector, not that you needed more weirdness. But I also remembered Thor being there to deliver it. I didn't remember that Thor was absent. It was just Volstagg and Sif that deliver the ether to the collector.
I remember it being weirder as well. But when you think about, we had seen how many times have you seen this, Bruce?
Have I seen? This is the second time probably for me.
So you basically had the same experience I had, where just by the mere appearance of the collector itself, it's a little weird because it's so vastly different than anything we saw in Thor the Dark World. And so I have that same feeling of like, wow, what are we in for with Guardians of the Galaxy? If that's the collector, holy cow.
If memory serves, James Gunn shot that. So
yes.
There you go.
And I also was like looking around. I thought there would be more interesting things in his containers. Did I miss some interesting stuff in those containers in the background?
No.
I didn't pause this time, I'll be honest.
And I kind of remembered his little assistant lady. I think I'm sort of confabulating multiple appearances of the collector all into this one. Like, yes. I thought I remembered something where the previous one had been punished for making a mistake, and this was the new one, and she was all nervous. But I think this is the previous one before she made her mistake that I'm seeing.
Yes.
And but yeah, I thought maybe Man-Thing was supposed to be in one of those containers. I thought something interesting. I knew for a fact that this wasn't the movie with Tobias Funke in the container. That's all that I knew for sure.
Well, you gotta draw the distinctive line somewhere, right?
Yeah, and then there's that very end credit scene where Thor goes back on Earth to see Jane Foster. And I just thought that this meant from this point forward, the first time I watched this movie, I was thinking, okay, so Thor like lives on Earth now. like he's a regular part of the Avengers. He's going to have to pick up a civilian identity or something. Like I thought for all the future Marvel movies, Thor was an Earth-based hero, and that turned out to evaporate super quick. Like,
well, that's what they made it seem like.
Yeah. So that was another one that I think I had blocked that one out of my memory. So because it didn't come true, and now watching it, it's even more disturbing knowing that, like, this is weird because not only do we not see Jane and Thor living together, we don't see Jane ever again, and I don't quite know when Thor left Earth.
I don't care one way or the other, because at the end of the day, this movie was not nearly as satisfying as
and that monster's still
running
loose. Is that something they wrapped up on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., or is that monster still like running loose out there?
He's in Ghostbusters.
Oh, perfect. Which Thor was also in Ghostbusters, right?
Yeah, and Ant-Man will be in the new Ghostbusters. So there you go. It all fits.
And he's good in Parks and Rec, a show I now watch.
Welcome to the jungle, buddy. All right, now, before we get to our final rating here and everything, we do have to ask ourselves one of the most important questions of the day, and that is how this movie relates to Sylvester Stallone.
Thank you, Adam. I have a prepared statement. And thank you, Kramer Morgenthau. Thank you for being the director of photography on Thor the Dark World. Not because of the lighting, not because of your shot compositions, but because you were the DP on Creed 2, which stars a guy that's the same age as everyone's grandfather. If your grandfather had a 40-year history of doing whatever he wanted whenever he wanted to do it, and his name was Sylvester Stallone. Creed 2 is a movie we've never really gotten into before because there hadn't been much that came out about Creed 2, but some of it has. So, for instance, 1. In November of 2018, Stallone stated that he'll probably no longer play Rocky on screen, which is sort of like Kiss saying they won't be performing live anymore. No one believes them. You know they're going to be performing live again, but people let them call every tour their farewell tour because it's Kiss. And if you're a Kiss fan, you know that Kiss is going to be lying to you. And when they're not lying, when they're finally not lying, Kiss needs to call their actual farewell tour. Paul is actually dying, so this is actually our farewell tour. Director of the first Creed, Ryan Coogler, wanted Sylvester Stallone to direct Creed 2, but Stallone said no. And they went with director Stephen Capel Jr., a good move, seeing as how Sylvester Stallone has never been one to completely take over a film shoot and acts professionally in every way to directors that he thinks he can roll over. The third thing, Brigitte Nielsen is back playing Ivan Drago's ex-wife, and in real life is Sylvester Stallone's ex-wife. They were married for 2 years. What were they even like together? Was their wedding cake made of cocaine? What could those two people possibly have in common that they thought to each other, oh, we got to get this thing down on paper? But to their credit, there's no stories of the two throwing down on the set of Creed 2, which means that when Stallone was writing the movie, he must have called Brigitte Nielsen and asked if she'd do the movie. And while it's not nice to think about, it's not like producers were knocking down Brigitte Nielsen's door asking about her availability for the next big project. So she said yes to Creed 2. Fourth thing, I also think that Creed 2 is the only Rocky movie where nobody close to Rocky dies in the movie. Hey, Rocky, if everyone around you is dying all the time, at some point, you got to figure out that the problem is you. Now, Kramer Morgenthau has also been the cinematographer on 2 episodes of Game of Thrones. He was the DP on Terminator Genesis and Chef, and many, many movies you've never heard of, so they're movies that don't actually exist. And there you have it, HMPers. This week's Stallone connection is Kramer Morgenthau. Thank you. I'm Sean Kovacs. Thank you.
Yes, indeed. Thank you. And now we'd like to just remind everybody that we don't do a regular kind of rating system here. No. We have our own patented Robin rating system. If you'd like to check that out, head on over to Facebook.com/Hero Movie Podcast. It's right there at the top of the screen. Bruce, where does Thor the Dark World fall on the Robin rating system for you, sir?
I think it's like a 66% rating on some of the popular rating sites out there, and that seems about right. Like it's not an absolute failure by any means. It's just you don't really remember much from it. A couple of important things happen. You know, we get another Infinity Gem. We get a reason for Thor to not be just chilling in Asgard all the time. So it accomplishes something. It's not totally without value. There's a couple of moments there. The action is just like standard, okay done, decent action. I think the thing that hurts Thor 2 the most is Thor 3 because it's just so much fun and we know where the character's going. But it's still, it's still worth a watch. I would give it a Damian Wayne, like straight down the middle on this one.
Yeah. Sean?
This one's a tough one for me. It's not. It's a middling Marvel movie, which isn't to say that it's bad and completely forgettable in every way. Like there's something about when Chris Hemsworth puts Mjolnir on the hook in the apartment. I don't know why that is so funny to me, but it's just so funny. And the stuff with Loki and Thor it's just some of the best stuff in the Marvel universe, in my opinion. It's just all the other wrapping around this movie is not so great. Like, give me Hannibal Lecter Loki all day long. There's something really great about that. So I wanna give it a Damian Wayne, but it's like a high Damian Wayne. That's the best way I can describe it because it's not top 25% at all. So let's give it a high Damian Wayne.
Yeah, it's Damian for me as well, but I think mine's probably a little bit lower. But there's a lot of things about this movie that work. Like you said, Sean, it's like there's little tiny individual pieces, but the whole itself is not exactly what it should be. But if this had come out, say, before Avengers or something, I think we might have a very different outlook on what this movie is. I think this movie is also, it's not wildly funny. It's not Ragnarok, but I think there's a little bit more levity in this movie than people probably remember from when they saw it the first time. Not all of it lands, mind you, but, it's attempted at least. But it's okay. And this to me felt a lot like, some of the other... the Paranormal Activity movies, as those went on in sequels, they actually made you appreciate the older ones more in the way that the story kind of progressed and everything. I'd honestly say with what we know of the future of Thor and where he ends up going, it almost made me probably enjoy this a little bit more than I actually would have from the get-of-go, I think.
Right.
And, not everybody is batting 1,000 all the time, and, we didn't mention it, but this is co-written by Marcus and McFeely, who undoubtedly have been the best writers for Marvel in this entire cinematic universe. So, who's to say? And like him and Yost, the other guy who was the third writer on this, he also, wrote in Ragnarok. So
there was also a Joss Whedon pass on this.
Well, that may, honestly,
hard to believe for me.
I don't know that
I would have guessed that.
I don't know that surprises me though, because some of that I can kind of see, but. Overall, it's not a terrible movie, probably not nearly as bad as most people remember it to be. And like I said, I think with the information that we have after this movie, it almost makes this movie a little bit more tolerable because it's going to get better at the end. So, yeah, Damian Wayne all across the board, it seems. Okay, well, now that we've gotten to the end of this episode, you know what we're going to do next week, boys? We're going to give back. Because you know what else we do outside of the pre-show and the post-show? And like this week, we did like a 48-minute Dinger Zone. We don't just do that sort of stuff. We also let our own patrons tell us what they want us to do every single month. So we've decided to give those guys a little bit of votes, and let's put up the let's get the names here again. So the choices are the Sam J. Jones The Saint. That's right, everyone wants that. A movie called Polar, Ghost World, or 2 episodes of Super Friends. And now if you are a member of the Patreon at any level, you'll be able to vote on what we watch, and we'll be watching that next week. So keep on the lookout for that. And again, Listener Appreciation Month coming up here in August, so if you want to go in, even at the dollar level, everyone is going to be able to get the Dinger Zone throughout the month of August. Get a little taste, and I think you're going to enjoy what you get there. In the meantime, Bruce, where can we find more of your work on the internet?
Well, I just want to let folks know that my co-host over on Chubby Wizard went to the drive-in last week.
Ooh.
Yeah, he went to the Canadian drive-in, which makes it sound even fancier.
They probably cleaned
it. He saw a movie called Crawl about a gator tsunami or something, and he told me all about it. So if you want to hear about the movie Crawl, as well as Stranger Things Season 3 and the wrap-up of The Wildstorm written by Warren Ellis, and I don't know, the final issue of The Walking Dead, we have all kinds of interesting stuff. It's a really long episode. Go check out Chubby Wizard.
I'll definitely check it out because I enjoyed Crawl myself. So good stuff. Sean, what do you got?
Preacher Podcast. Come find us at Preacher Podcast.
Preacher Podcast.
Oh, crap. That's like August 4th is going to be here soon, guys.
It's going to be here so fast. Other things that we're going to be doing are going to be here so fast. And you want to hear about those things? Check out the Dinger Zone next week because we'll be talking about it over there. Until then, for Bruce Leslie, Sean Koufax, my name is Adam Portrais. Stay super, everybody.
Bye, Marty and Evie.
Here he comes.
Boogie that, boogie that.
Here he goes.
Boogie that, boogie that.
And he ain't wearing no clothes.
Oh, yes, they call him the street. Fastest thing on 2 feet. He's just as proud as he can be of his anatomy. He gon' give us a peek. Oh, yes, they call him the street. Likes to show off his physique. If there's an audience to be found, he'll be streaking it round, inviting public critique.
Hello, once again, everyone. Your action news reporter on the scene at the gas station. There seemed to have been some disturbance here. Pardon me, sir. Did you see what happened?
Yeah, I did. I was just sitting here trying to get some air in my car there, and he just appeared out of the traffic. Come streaking around the grease strike there, didn't have nothing on but a smile. Ethel's in there getting her a cold drink. I hollered in there, I said, "Don't look, Ethel!" Too late, she done been moved. Flashed her right there in front of the shock absorbers.
He ain't good.
Boogie that, boogie that.
He ain't good.
A boogie that, boogie that.
He's just in the mood to run in the news.
Well, yes, they call him the street. Likes to turn the other cheek. He's always making the news, wearing just his tennis shoes. Guess you could call him unique.
Hello, once again, everyone. Your action news reporter in the booth at the gym, covering the disturbance at the basketball playoff. Pardon me, sir. Did you see what happened?
Yeah, I did. It's halftime. I was just going down there to get Ethel a snow cone. Here he comes, right out of the cheap seats. Right down the middle of the court there, didn't have nothing on but his high-top Reeboks. He was dribbling, made a jump shot, got out through the concession. I hollered up at Ethel, I said, "Don't look, Ethel!" Too late, she done got a free shot. Grandstanded her right there in front of the home team. Oh, yes, they call him the street. Whoa, here he comes again. Fastest thing on who's that with me? Ethel? Is that you, Ethel? Where do you think you're going? Of his anatomy.